Guys, today on the Keaton Nelson Show, I have a very special treat for you. Today I have Estee Estee Stein. I messed it up and I just asked her what her name was. See, we're not even editing it out. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Keaton. I love that. I'm all about authenticity and pulling back the curtain, and I love it. I love it.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, I just want to like kind of get to know you, ask some questions about you know, like where you're from, where you've been, and how you got to where you are and what you're doing now. So yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? How did you grow up?
Okay, so if you can't tell by my accent, I am from Long Island, New York, born and bred and raised. And I went to private school growing up, and then I ended up going to FIT in Manhattan, the Fashion Institute of Technology, where I learned pattern making and sewing, although not very well. And then went into the fashion industry thinking I'm going to be a clothing designer. But I soon, very quickly learned that just because one likes shopping doesn't mean that they could be a clothing designer. So very quickly, I realized that wasn't for me and I had to pivot. And I still wanted to stay in the industry. So I started designing and merchandising and sourcing and branding for accessory companies within the fashion industry. And I traveled the world. So I got to see every place on earth through the company's dimes. I worked in corporate for 20 years and I loved it. But one day I had kind of like an epiphany where I said, I don't want to spend the rest of my life because after I traveled for 20 years, then I decided, okay, maybe I don't want to travel so much. So then I switched jobs to another corporate job where I was sitting behind a computer. And then I was like, oh, I don't really want to sit behind a computer all day, every day. Yeah. So then I left there, and now I teach all the things that I know and have learned in corporate branding and otherwise, and merchandising designing to small business owners.
Mm. Yeah, so I saw you in your bio that my assistant sent over. You worked at some like somewhat big companies, right? What's some of the like biggest name? What's the biggest company you think you work for, or
You know,
most
it's
well known, maybe?
right. So I've worked for a lot of big companies, as you said, but I think what was the most impactful for me was Disney, because working on Disney, I learned a lot about licensing, and I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a style guide. And I didn't know Mickey Mouse couldn't make a peace sign because, he's not supposed to be political, or that there were two different Mickey Mouses. There was pie eyed and open eye. And one was retro and one was modern, and one was for the parks and one was for the department stores. Like, who knew all this stuff?
Huh.
So I loved learning the process of branding, that there's a story behind the character, that there's a story behind the brand or the name or the logo. And that for me was just so exciting.
Mm. So what was like your job at Disney? I'm just out of
Oh, so actually, I didn't work at Disney. I worked at a company that had the Disney license. So I would go
okay.
to Disney and present to them every season the line or the collection of what I was designing. And then we walk through it and talk about it and talk about the emotions or the feelings that we want people to feel when they own a piece of the brand, right? Because people are really buying through emotions. So I think that with Disney, it was the fun of it was coming up with creative designs that challenge the day to day and the regular stuff that was out there, but yet still being on brand for Disney.
Interesting. Was it all like shirts and fashion and stuff like that? What was like kind of
Act-
stuff you were designing?
it was actually hosiery and socks.
Hosiery and
And
stocks.
it was fascinating because at
Hmm.
the time, back in the day, we didn't even have computers. There was like one ginormous computer and it was in a separate room and you like couldn't even go in there. Only one person was allowed at a time. And so we would literally by hand be checking in these little square graphs for every stitch of Mickey Mouse, and if you were off by one stitch, it just screwed up the whole face. Like, and the stitches are V neck or V shape, but the squares are square, right? So it's
Hmm.
like you fill in a square thinking you're filling in a square, but then you get the sock back and it's a V.
Interesting.
Mind blowing. Yeah.
Cool. What kind of places did you travel to?
Oh, everywhere. So I traveled to Italy a ton, so that was definitely my favorite place. But I also loved going to Korea, Brazil, Mexico, Japan, France. Um, where else did I go? Just everywhere. China.
Wow.
We would go to whether I was looking for designs for inspiration
Yep.
or I was going to factories because I also work for another big company, Hanes Apparel, Hanes Hosiery, and they had factories all over the world because you can't just make everything in one place because you have to keep up with the demand. So I would
Hmm.
have to go to different factories to work with the factories to get the products made properly.
Yeah. You remind me of one of my clients. She worked for like Coach and Adidas and things like that. And she'd be literally traveling to all these different factories, and like the supply chain is like nothing, no consumer can like realize. Like it's crazy how much goes into all that type of stuff.
And it's funny that you're mentioning Coach because originally Hanes and Coach were under the umbrella of Sara Lee. Remember the cakes, Sara
Oh
Lee
yeah.
cakes? So that was the head brand, and then it was, I guess, a house of brands where they had multiple companies until Coach spun off on their own.
Huh. No, I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Cool. And so you have any like crazy stories that happened when you're traveling?
Oh yeah, I remember. I think Korea was my favorite place. After Italy,
Mm-hmm.
I loved Korea because it just to me it was the city that never sleeps. Even though New York is the city that never sleeps, it's true with Korea because it would be 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm out doing, I don't know, karaoke or I don't even know what we were doing. And the lady turns to me and she goes, "Do you want to go shopping?" And oh my God, that's music to my ears. I'm like, "Shopping? It's 2 o'clock in the morning." They're like, "Yeah, let's go, let's go." So we went to the street and they light up the streets like New York City, spotlights all over the place. You would think it was daylight. And people come from all different countries and all different areas with their wares. And then she took me down a flight of stairs and I would get like it was like the black market. I'd get like a Ferragamo belt for like $10. I'm like, this is great.
That's pretty cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
And what are you up to now? You're teaching what, Instagram?
Yeah, so I'm teaching Instagram and I'm really trying to educate people on brand strategy because today everyone's a personal brand, right? So even though you're showing up online, whether you're selling a product or a service, there's still a person behind the brand. And that's really what consumers are looking for today. They don't want to buy from a big brand. And that's why the big companies are hiring the creators and influencers to promote their wares so that people will connect. And people want to connect with other people, especially in times like these when people are working remotely and no one's going into the office and there's very little socialization, people want to feel a connection. And so I help the small guys, the little businesses, show up online so that they have that hybrid of looking corporate or looking professional, but at the same time having that connection with their audience or their followers or their customers so that they can make the sale.
Is there like a certain process you take them through?
Yeah, so I like to do it. I do one-on-one basically because then it's customized with the company. So, because you have all different types of companies and they're all going to be slightly different from each other. And basically, I teach, it's kind of like a 6-week course, but it could be condensed if the client doesn't have the time. I do it on Zoom and I
Hmm.
record all the classes so that they can have it afterwards. I find that oftentimes people they'll purchase a digital course that was pre-recorded and they just never finish the course. They never have the transformation. They just nothing happens. Maybe they grab one or two, mind-blowing things, but they don't really do what the course was set out to do.
Right.
So when you're working with a coach or someone like me, then you have accountability. I give you homework assignments to do, I give you handouts, we work one on one. I never kind of leave you hanging if you have questions, if you get stuck. I just help you get unstuck with whatever part of the process in your business you're stuck with. And that's pretty much how I roll.
Yeah. But I mean, like, what are like some of the things like even the people that are listening right now, let's say that they just started a brand and or they're trying to grow their Instagram, or like what's some nuggets that you could give away here that they could listen to and then go home and start working on?
Okay, so if somebody was just starting out, so they already have an account or they don't even have an account. Wasn't sure what.
Um, let's say they don't even have an account. They want to start right now.
Right.
Just something.
So the first thing I would tell them to do is look at some accounts that they aspire to be, where they see themselves in the marketplace, and start looking at what they are crafting in terms of the layouts, the looks, the colors, things like that, and see where they can play, not copy, but see where they can emulate that's on brand for them, what they want to, how they want to come across, right? And play around with the camera, take a couple of pictures. People are often really scared to show up online, as
Mm-hmm.
I was at the beginning. And I think that it's really important with practice, you'll get more comfortable and you'll show up more. So I would start looking at other accounts. I would take some pictures of themselves, start writing things down, start journaling what exactly they want to do with their company or their product or their service, what they want to get across on social media, and whether they're using Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, to just really, really be consistent. That's the main thing. When I say consistent, I don't just mean showing up at the same time at the same day. I mean with their branding, with their photos. So if you're one way on Facebook, don't think you should have a different picture on Instagram or LinkedIn, because think about, it's like going to a party and you meet somebody there and their hair is long and curly and maybe they're wearing red lipstick and a black dress and I don't know, fake eyelashes. And then 6 months later, you meet up at a different party and they've cut their hair really short. They're not wearing any makeup or fake eyelashes. And they're, I don't know, in jeans and a t shirt. And it's like, oh, wait, is this the same person? And, when we're online, I call it like squirrel syndrome. We're like jumping from place to place, like whoever has our attention at the moment, right? Stolen focus. And so when you go there, you don't have a lot of time to think. So the picture really is impactful. So if you see somebody showing up one way on Facebook and then another way on Instagram, you may or may not know it's the same brand. And so
Mm-hmm.
you may bounce because you're like, oh, that's not her. And so you keep going. So just be consistent with your pictures, what you look like, how you're showing up, your names, your fonts, your colors, and then also be consistent with how often you're showing up on whichever platform you choose to play on.
Got it. What kind of who's like the ideal client for you? Who do you help the most, or who would you love to be helping the most? Um, you know what I mean? Like if someone is listening to this and they are the perfect person, who are they?
Yeah, so my ideal client is, thank God, I've had the luxury of choosing my clients. They come to me, actually. All my clients I get organically. They either find me through my Instagram or word of mouth, a lot of them. And thank God I work with great companies, great people. And once in a while you get that client that you just don't really connect with, either because of what they're promoting or their personality or whatever it is. And you know, you work through it, but they're not necessarily your ideal. So, who's my ideal client? Someone who's struggling, someone who's, not really sure. They know they need to be on social media. They know that everybody's migrating to shopping online and going online, and 86% of all consumers look online before they make a purchase about a product or a service. So they know they have to play there, but they're just not really sure how to show up. And they're overwhelmed because they're trying to run their business, and doing social media could be a full-time job. So they just want that transformation, those quick tips and tricks so that they could get them on the ground up and running. And some of them end up coming back to me and saying, can you manage my account? So I've done that as well. So, and I do that as well. But the my favorite ones are the ones who can then do it on their own, so they don't have to keep hiring and they don't have to keep going back and buying course after course after course thinking this is going to be the one to fix me, this is going to be the one, and then it's not.
Mm. Um, is it like male or female, a specific age, or like should they have a certain amount of revenue already, or should they just be getting off the ground? I'm just interested. Like,
Oh yeah, so that's fine.
hmm.
So I mostly work with women, but I have worked
Mhm.
with men too. And so they say that typically your ideal customer is somebody who's you 5 years earlier.
Right.
So I'm 53. I don't hide it. And so
What?
yeah, I
No way.
I have a really good camera.
Yeah. Also, I doubt
And
it's the camera.
I also thank you. I also tell people I act like a child, so maybe that's resonating. I don't know.
No way.
1968. Yep, that's
I
me.
would have never guessed.
Thank
That's
you.
wild.
Thank you.
Yeah. I thought
So,
you're like my age.
yes,
I'm 28. This
I
is like,
wish. I
yeah.
wish. Yeah, in my head I am, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a number. It's all good. But the
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that so someone like me who, as I said earlier, like we didn't even have a computer in the room and I was, hand drawing everything. I want to help those people who need to be there, but they just don't know, and maybe they're a little slower at it, or they're just not comfortable at it, or they don't even know. Like they say you can Google anything, but if you don't know what to Google, then you're totally lost, right? Or
Mhm.
you have the business, you're online, you're on the social media, but like you get stuck. Maybe you're stuck doing reels, or maybe you're just stuck showing up, and it's very hard to move forward when you get stuck. And so a lot of people just stay there. And so I help with that transformation. So my ideal customer, I guess, is female. She's in her 40s. She's stuck. She's nervous. She's overwhelmed. She's stressed. She wants to be calm. She wants to feel positive. She wants to feel powerful. And she wants to show up online and she wants to feel strong. And I empower her.
Mm. Cool. Awesome. So what what I know you're saying like they're struggling with like, showing up and everything online. And then you said like to, be consistent with your brand and all everywhere on social media, whether no matter the platform. Do you have any like recommendations for like how often people should post, or, even like how long the caption should be, or what type of post, or like there's like a lot of questions that people are interested in. Like should they be posting carousels or reels, or should they be a balance, or like what's your answer to that?
So it's a great question, and I think it's going to depend on the brand, the size of the brand,
Mm-hmm.
and the company's goals. Meaning, are you in a season to sell something? Do you have an offer? Do you want people to just get to know you? Are you just trying to grow a following? It really will just depend on what your bucket list is in terms of really what you want to achieve on the platform. So if you're looking to grow a cold audience that maybe they haven't discovered you yet, then obviously I would recommend Reels. But I do think that it's important to have captions and even not captions, carousels, and even static posts, because there are other things that you want to get across on your feed, like them getting to know you and you sharing your personal story or making your connection will get them to identify you, because everyone has to get to know, like, and trust you, and they can't if all you're doing are these little trendy reels, right?
Mm.
And so there's also stories and highlight covers and all the things, so it all has to be in place. And when you ask me like how often a brand should post, it'll go back to consistency. What can you maintain? So literally, if it's once a week, great, then just do it once a week. You want to show up 4 times a day? Great, show up 4 times a day. It'll also depend on what your goals are. Are you trying to just grow a following, or are you trying to get sales? What exactly are you doing on the app? Or you just want to, share, spread the love? All that stuff is all
Mhm.
good. It'll just depend on what your goals are.
Yeah, let's say that like I have someone in mind who just launched a multi-purpose, like it's kind of like a diaper bag stroller accessorizer thing, but it like looks like a nice purse, like really like looks great. And she's just starting. She's got on Amazon and her website and all that type of stuff. Launched like about a month ago, and she, she's starting to post on social media, and she wants sales. Her goal is to get more sales. What would be like the first five things you tell her to do?
Well, the first thing I would do is make sure that and again, I'm talking to Instagram, but I don't know if we're just talking about Instagram or
Yeah, her main
Facebook.
focus is Instagram. So
Yeah. So then I would make sure that her bio is, very driven towards because the bio is the most important real estate on Instagram as far as I'm concerned, because
Hmm.
people find your post on the homepage, right? And then they go to your bio picture is the first thing they do, and then they read your bio, what you've written there, the 150 characters. And right away they want to know who you are, what you do, and how you can help them. So that's the first thing they're going to do. So that's the most important part. And if you want sales, and the first thing you want to do is have them shop right then and there. So you can say, click here, make sure you have some sort of emoji that has that actionable thing going on so that the brain knows, oh, she wants me to click here, because it's very nice. She has this diaper bag that looks like a pocketbook, but like if I don't know what you want me to do with that, then it's click here. So if you're someone who's not organized, or again, I don't know her branding, I don't know what her emotion words are, things like that, but once you get through the strategy, the brand strategy of the values, the brand core, which are the values, the mission, and the vision, what's her purpose. And if it's to get overwhelmed, stressed out moms who are on the go and is always forgetting their diaper bag because they don't want to schlep this big ugly pack, right? But they
Hmm.
want that. So then that first line's got to grab me to say, stressed and overwhelmed, I have your answer right here. Come shop here. And then whatever your call outs are, is it free shipping? What are you going to give me with that? So what, or whatever it is that makes your brand or product unique, that I'm going to want your bag over somebody else's. So those things have to be all woven into the bio with SEO, search engine optimization, so that if somebody's going online, and I'm searching for that mommy bag or the diaper bag or whatever that is, that's weaved into the bio. So I would highly recommend that. And then of course I would have, the highlight covers that are on brands, about the brand, mommy on the go. Maybe you want to do, feature people who've purchased the bag, and then you can, run stories that say as seen on, or, and tag the other person so they get their account seen as well, and they get, you want to be featured. I mean, a lot of brands grow that way. So I would definitely do that. If she has a store set up, she could also, within her feed, she can tag the product
Yep.
and, have the pricing there. So I would offer that. And definitely videos of showing the bag in action, how it's being used, where you're going, what the features are, over and over and over again, with the correct filters that are consistent. So when I say consistency, it's not just how you show up or how often you show up or even just the bio, but even on your filters. Are you being consistent with your filters? Are you being consistent with your captions? You asked me before about long form caption versus short form. I think that, that's like, that conversation goes back and forth. It used to be long form, then it became short form. Now it's back to long form. It'll just depend on your audience. I tell everyone, marketing is all test, try, and tweak. So you'll try the long form. If it's not resonating with the audience, you'll check your insights after 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and go back and say, okay, this worked, this didn't. It could be that it's too long form. It could be she's stressed out. She's got the kids crying in the backseat of the car, and she doesn't have time to read the caption. So maybe short form would be better for her. That's what I'm thinking.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's interesting that you like. I mean, I gave you very little. Well, I gave you a brand, and then you came up with all these ideas to do that. So that's what you help people with and walk them through it for their own either product or service.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, when you're doing it, it's so hard to be objective. When you're in the bottle, you can't read the labels. So sometimes you just have to have that other person go, oh, within 2 minutes, yeah, I get it. This is what you need.
mhm. That's good. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, is it, you teach people how to do this stuff, and my company does all that stuff for everyone. So it's cool.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
and yeah. Do you have any like success stories like with your clients?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because my very first client was someone who had a shampoo business, shampoo company, and she had wanted to start her own label. And her English wasn't 100%. And she just found me in some Facebook group. And I don't even think I finished my spiel. Like I'm one sentence, two sentences. She's like, I'm in. Those are my favorite clients. Like I'm in those low hanging fruit of
Yeah.
I want whatever you're selling. So I loved working with her because no matter what I said, no matter what I did, she was so happy. And she basically, it's kind of funny because she didn't actually come out with the product. She stayed with the company and she stayed with the shampoos and the soaps and conditioners, and she's a supplier for major corporations all over the world, and her plant is in Mexico, I believe. And she never actually came out with the product, but she said to me that I did for her something that no one else could do, which is I literally just pulled back the curtain and said, okay, here you go. I got you. And I'm going to tell you every little thing that you didn't know, how people are showing up and how they're doing it. And that's really all she wanted. And that was mind blowing for me. But I also will tell you another favorite story of mine, which is, and it's really three different people that didn't have companies. They had jobs or careers and they wanted to pivot.
Mm.
And they couldn't do it. And I'm like, you could do this. You could totally do this. So those people I only met with 2 or 3 times. We didn't have a 6-week course or anything like that, where I just said to them, okay, here's where you're at. Here's where I see what you're good at. Here's what you love to do. This is what you need to be doing, or this is where I see you playing. Let's position you to get there. And it's kind of just a mindset. And when I saw the transformation, I mean, these people come back and say like, oh, I owe Estee my life. Without Estee, I wouldn't have gotten here, or I wouldn't have gotten there. One person had just graduated college and she had no job, no career. She actually went to school for marketing. It was 6 months after she graduated and she was literally doing nothing. And I'm like, okay, you're coming to me and we're doing this. And within, I think, we met twice. I helped her get a job. She really wanted to work in corporate, but COVID had just hit and nobody was offering jobs at that moment. So I helped her get a job on Long Island. She stayed there about a year and a half. She got really good at what she was doing. And we met once or two more times on Zoom. And then she got her dream job in Manhattan. And I really think it was just a mindset. She was so beating on herself and her family was so beating her down. Get a job, get a job, get a job. And, she just didn't know what to do. And, you see from people's body language, they're slumped over, they're not smiling, they're looking down, they're kind of trying to make themselves small. And you say, sit up tall, you're amazing, you're beautiful, you can do this. And it's like, oh, well, if she believes in me, then how could I not believe in me? And so that to me is better than any business or company or brand or anything like that. When I make a person feel good about themselves, it was there all the time, right? She had the magic all the time. She just didn't know it, or she just didn't see it. And I help them see it in themselves. That's what lights me up.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned mindset. How important is mindset?
Wow. Unbelievable. It's funny because, a lot of times I batch create. So I'll batch create my reels, right? And I remember one day I was having a really bad day and I was crying and I don't even remember. I looked like crap and I just like, I'm just going to do this because it's on my to-do list and I'm going to do it. So I batch created, I did the thing, and then my friend looks at it and they're like, you don't look like you're having fun. You don't look and I'm like, you mean because 5 minutes ago I was crying before I did the reel? I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm not. And from that moment I realized if I'm having a bad day, I'm not going to do that thing on the to-do list because I know it's going to come across. Whether you realize it or not, if you're not in a good mood, if you're not feeling good about yourself, it's going to come out in the copy, in the video, in the words that you're using. So do something else that day. I don't know, clean your house or walk the dog or, meditate or journal or just do something to get in a better space. But if your head is not in the right space, don't do it.
What about just believing in yourself? I mean, I feel like a lot of the times people who do well are like they're not any smarter than anyone else. They don't have any more education than anyone else. They don't have any more connections than anyone else, but they have this belief in themselves, and then that's like unwavering, that they're just like know that they're meant for more. Those are the ones that end up succeeding far beyond all the others. Would you say that's true, BS, or what?
It's so true. And I didn't really go into my backstory, but growing up, I was always criticized, in a loving way, of course. They didn't know any better. So it was like, "Oh, Esty, you're chubby," or "Esty, you're getting fat," or "Esty, you're not so smart," or and you believe those stories, And so it sits there, whether you even if you logically know it's not so, it's still sitting in your brain, and you got to get that out. So I always tell people to write it down, get that, I don't know if I can curse here, but get that shit
Yeah,
out of your
yeah, yeah, I
head.
swear.
Get that shit out of your head and just put it down on paper. And eventually, what happens is it separates from you. And there's a book that I highly recommend called Personality Isn't Permanent by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Because I think that many of us are looking for someone to give us permission to do whatever it is we want to do. And what he says is, just because you were told something as a child, just because you were told you weren't good in math, doesn't make it so. And just because you were bad at something, maybe you were bad at sports when you were younger, it doesn't hold true for today. Maybe I was chubby then and I'm not now. I don't know. The point is that just because someone told you something doesn't make it true. Get it out of your head and tell yourself the things that you need to hear to make yourself stand up tall, be proud, and love who you are. Because there's a podcast I also highly recommend, Jim Fortin, and it's all about transformational coaching, from transform yourself from the inside out. And what he talks about is basically just whatever you want to be, right? In life, whoever you want to be, whether it's a doctor, a lawyer, a podcaster, content creator, whatever it is, a shampoo designer, whatever you want to be, just put it out there. And then once you say that you're that thing, that person, or that career, then what are the steps that you need to do to become that person, right? And those are the things that that's the work. We all have to do the work. So it is good to have the mindset. It is good to have the motivation. There's a clubhouse that I listen to all the time, Evan Carmichael, Unbreakable Stories. Every day it's all different celebrities and just, influential people from around the world, and, their highlights. It runs for 24 hours. It's a great room. And it's the motivation. And the motivation will take you, but it'll only take you just so far. You've got to actually do the work. So whatever it is that lights you up, that gets you out of bed every day, that when you look at the clock, it's 8 hours later and you can't believe it, whatever you were doing for those 8 hours, and I don't mean scrolling on Instagram, but whatever you're doing for those 8 hours work-wise, that's your jam. That's what lights you up, because you're not looking at the clock, you don't feel like it's work, and that's what you need to be doing. So just say the words and get the shit out of your head, put that down on paper someplace else, say whatever it is you are, own it, and then just do the steps to get you there. That's it.
Yeah, that's great advice. The more I do these podcast episodes and the more I talk to people who have kind of been through it and they're on the other side of quote unquote success, there's so many patterns that are the same. People's advice ends up being the same, just told very slightly differently, right? There's another where you said get the shit that's that you're not comfortable with. It's the stuff that you don't like, get it out on paper, get it out, and it's going to separate itself from you. And then on the other side, like you said, saying that you are this person who you want to be. Their recommendation, another person, they said, take a result in your life that you're not happy about, right? The way your bank account looks, how much free time you have, how little you travel, how, whatever it happens to be, whatever you're unhappy with, unsatisfied with, write it on paper. And then take another piece of paper and write out the complete opposite of that. Right. And then take the first piece of paper and burn it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Put it in an ashtray, put it in your sink, burn it, and get rid of it.
Wow.
It's symbolic, seems silly, but he says, this is your license to be silly. Go be silly. Do something crazy. Light it on fire. And then he tells you do it over and over for all the things that you're unsatisfied with, because it's like a law of polarity is what he calls it, right? On one side, there's a positive and a negative. So if you can take your negative and think about what the opposite of that is, let's say it's I'm stressed out by my finances and I don't have enough money to pay my bills. What's the opposite of that? I have an abundance of finances, and I never worry about making a purchase or looking at a price tag ever again. And
Right.
you know what I mean? And
Right.
focusing on that. But you're right, that only goes so far, right? I mean, you got to start taking some steps and actions. I mean, Think and Grow Rich, they talk about this a lot. And I they talk about like the secret inside. You read Think and Grow Rich before?
I read The Secret many, many years ago. The book, The Secret. Yeah.
Oh, I haven't read the book The Secret, but that's based off of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Right.
And what I think the secret is in all of that mix of stuff, because they give you a lot of like, woohoo type of stuff, is actually doing the dang work, right? Like taking the steps and the action, because that's gonna, move you towards it. And you touched upon like your identity or like self-image too, right? Like holding that person who you want to be, and that you know you said say it out loud, right? I think that's brilliant. And then I also like to tie that to a person who's already done what you want to do, right? So like, let's say you want to build a brand that let's stick with the mommy brand, right? That a diaper bag, that company that has done what you want to do, and their CEO, right? And you kind of study that person, see what they've done. And then when you're faced with a problem or an obstacle or a day-to-day or what do I do next, you can ask yourself, what would the CEO of this successful company do in my position right now? A lot of times we have the answer inside of us and we don't. That's just like a way to pull it out. You know what I mean? Because I think that's like another struggle is too, like while you're saying this, like take the next 5 action steps. Like people will say like, I don't know what that is. What is that? And I said, this is my adding on top of what you said. I would definitely say, ask yourself, if someone who's like 10 times more successful or 10 times wiser than I am, what would they do in that
Yeah, I
situation?
like that. I like that. Yeah. I mean, it's hard because until you know what the struggle is or what exactly they're stuck on, but a
Mm,
lot of times it's just getting out of their head. So, I was telling somebody else the other day on a podcast, like, we all thought Steve Jobs was crazy. He would walk around the block and he didn't have shoes on, but like that's where his creativity came out, right? That's where his thinking came out. So sometimes it's good to just do something else in the moment. I
mm,
remember one time I was traveling to Switzerland and I went to Bern and saw where Albert Einstein lived for 8 years when he, made his discovery E equals MC squared. And I heard he was like working in the post office at the time. He was married to his first wife. He was like walking around, like he wasn't sitting at his desk writing out the formulas, right? So it's like it's kind of what the big creators do. Leonardo da Vinci, he discovered a flying machine, while he was doing all the other stuff. It's like just dabble in everything else. Darwin also, he was like studying algae or something like that. Like, you have to study all different things, all the big creators, the big thinkers of our generation and before. And when you do the other things, it gets your mind start to churn, and you don't just stay stuck in the box of that company or that thing. It's almost like take from a totally different sector and say, oh, how can I apply that to my business or my world, where it's like thinking differently.
ooh, that's good. That's good. Listen up, guys. That's great advice. Um, I have a few questions I want to ask you. Um, you mentioned a book earlier, but I'm wondering, like, are you a reader? You read a lot?
So I'm glad you asked me that also, because I feel like for many years I didn't. I was
Mhm.
in and out, in and out. It was very hard to get back in. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to start with some trashy novels just to get back into the idea of getting comfortable of reading. And then I started reading nonfiction and I got heavy on the nonfiction. And then I started switching off between fiction and nonfiction so that it wasn't all just nonfiction. But so now I do try to read a lot. There are times where I did stop watching TV, but then like every once in a while, someone will tell me some great, Netflix thing to binge watch. But I see when I'm doing that, I can't read. And when I'm doing that, sometimes like I'll literally have nightmares at night. It's the weirdest thing. So I really try to avoid TV, Netflix, all that stuff, because I look at that as kind of like junk food for the brain, which, okay, every once in a while you need a treat. I get that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, what do they say? The the most brilliant guys, the most accomplished people in the world, they're reading 60 books a year, right? So that's pretty much a book a week and a little extra. So every book on my bookshelf I've read. So I make sure I don't just display it for when I'm doing my reels or whatever. Like, I've actually read them. And I recently heard that what a really good idea to do is to reread some of your books. Now go back over it with the highlighter.
Yeah.
And you end up gaining even more knowledge, which is kind of crazy because you read the book, you think you got the idea from the book, and then you go on to the next book, right? But imagine if you can go back and reread the same book because you already own it. So, and you start going with a highlighter. Now you came up with 5 more ideas. Wow, that's incredible. So yes, I do read a lot, to answer your question. Mostly nonfiction. I try to pepper in some fiction just to break up my mindset. And all my books are here on the wall. So yeah, any one of them we could talk about.
Well, I'm wondering if you had to pick one book to recommend to the readers that would like transform their life or give them even a catalyst to get them going where they need to be going. What's the one book that you would recommend or you think that everyone should read?
There's so many books I think everyone should read. And if you go on my website, I actually have a list of books, whether it's for personal development or business development. So it
You're
would
only
really
allowed to
just depend.
list one. You're only allowed to pick one.
Okay, then I'm just gonna pick Simon Sinek because he's just literally my guru, my go-to
The
for
Power of
inspiration.
Why.
And no, I'm not.
Together is better.
Together is better. And it's a children's book, but there is just so many fabulous quotes in it. And it's not a big purchase. And what I like about it is I could read it over and over and over again and get inspired every day to do the work. And what's nice about it is, it's not a big investment with money or time. I love him. I recommend all his books, but I just love this. It's just something I keep by my side and I look at it every day and it inspires me to connect with other people, because if you just go through life and you're just working and you're by yourself, that's not so fulfilling. That's not going to light you up. We're a society of people and we need to come together and support each other and serve each other and help each other with whatever we're stuck on. And so, yeah, Together is Better by Simon Sinek. I mean, just a cute little book to
That's
recommend.
cool. I never even heard of it. I love that. Um, I love getting these book recommendations too because they get tossed right onto my list of books. I had a podcast earlier this week and I started the book that he recommended.
Oh, what
Yeah.
book?
The Magic of Thinking Big.
Oh, okay, that sounds good.
It is good. It's interesting. A lot of kind of stuff we were talking about. It's like the difference between someone who's like super successful and the person who isn't, but they have all the same attributes, like intellectually, physically, and all that type of stuff. The difference between the two people is that the person who's more successful thought a lot bigger.
I like that. That's
And
great.
that's the only difference, is that the whole
That's
book's about
great.
that. And so like it's a pretty hefty book. It's got quite a bit of knowledge in it.
I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, you will. And the reader should too. I'm liking it so far. I'm like chapter 2. And this is questions I ask every single guest. What's the biggest regret you have in your life?
It's funny because I always tell people I can't stand when I hear celebrities say they have no regrets. I have a ton of regrets in life. And it's hard to say because my biggest regret is not having a plan. You can go through life and there are 2 ways you can go, right? You could just take the jobs as they come and grab this one, then go to the next one, or you can chart out your path. Where do you want to get to, or where do you see yourself in 5, 10, 20 years, and then create the path to get there. And I definitely chose the former, where I just grabbed the job because I had to pay my bills, I had to pay my rent. And so my biggest regret is not planning it out at your stage in life, at age 20 or even 30. And and wishing that had I done that, then perhaps I would have it would have been a fluid, perhaps it would have been a fluid journey, or a straight path, a straight line, instead of a lot of these zigzags. But then again, I wouldn't have traveled and seen the world, and I wouldn't have gotten all the knowledge that I've gained or met all the people that I've met. So it's hard to say what my regret is, because with the regret also comes a lot of positive.
Mm,
So it's a hard question to ask, but I guess that's my biggest regret.
yeah, that's interesting. It's a good point. Like if you don't know where you're going, kind of just end up going wherever.
Yeah, wherever it takes you, wherever the money is, wherever whichever is offering you the more money. Okay, maybe you take another job because you want to be in a certain city, whatever that is. But it doesn't necessarily help your career when you're trying to carve out a niche for yourself and hone your skills and really work on whatever you're passionate about. Because if you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life, right? That's what they say. So I feel like had I done that, then it just may have been a lot easier.
Mm, interesting. I might need to be thinking about that. um, so, and this kind of ties into it, maybe it doesn't, because it could be positive too. But if you can go back in time, you can go back to any age, and you can go to your younger self, and you're only allowed to say 3 sentences to yourself. What age would you go back to, and what would you say?
18, you're beautiful, you're smart, and you can do anything.
Mm.
That's what I would say to myself. Is that 3 sentences?
That's
They're three
good.
very short sentences.
No, that's good. That's
Okay,
good. That's what your 18-year-old self would need to hear.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Because
Um,
I just, I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm going to FIT. I want to go into fashion. Like, but I wasn't thinking long term. I wasn't thinking down the line. Is this what I'm really good at? I got a D in sewing. Like, it was not the place for me. Like,
yeah, I can imagine. I can't imagine actually. I'm like, I couldn't sewing. Gosh.
I hated sewing. I hated it.
So where can people go follow you, check you
Oh
out?
yeah. So thank you for asking. I'm on Instagram at I am Estee Stein, or you can go to my website and book a free call with me. 30 minutes. We'll go over whatever it is you are stuck on or want to work through. And my website is just my name, ESTEESTEIN. So it's www.estestein.com.
Cool. We'll link it all up in the notes and all that stuff too.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, is there anything that, let's say, like everyone, in the whole entire world is listening to this podcast, and you can ask, you've given a lot of knowledge here. You've given a lot, of, tips and tricks from Instagram to life and all this type of stuff. You've given a lot. You're giving people a free 30-minute call. Is there anything that you would ask from your audience, from this audience?
Just, I want you to be happy. I want you to feel fulfilled. So if what you're doing is not making you happy or not making you feel fulfilled, then let's jump on a call. If you're happy with what you're doing, but you're stuck, then let me help you get unstuck. And whatever that is, whether it's showing up on video or making a plan to show up online with your posting schedule or even with your content or your products, yeah, just reach out.
Mm, awesome. Well, I say this every time. I'm doing this podcast for free. I don't want to sell anyone anything. I don't want to make any money from it. I'm probably not going to ever advertise on the podcast. Um, I just want to bring knowledge from people like you to people who need it, and also build relationships, because I truly believe that relationships are like the new economy, the new currency, so much more so than anything financial. And and I asked the audience, your payment for the podcast is for you to go share this out. Guys, if you're listening, go share out this podcast, because I mean, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you're killing it on Instagram. You don't need any help. You got an awesome business or whatever. But there's someone that's going to need to hear this. Like, share this out, share this episode out, tag me in it. I'll definitely share it back out, and leave some reviews so I can get more awesome guests. like Estee on here. And thank you so much for listening. And Estee, thank you so much for being on the podcast here
Keaton, thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
today. Awesome. Till next time. Peace.